Hello!
Hello and welcome to Biggest I Ever Had with Dan and Dave, a weekly music show where we talk about the 25 biggest selling singles in UK chart history.
And also talk about things that will get us sued by Cliff Richard. But anyway, yeah, if you didn't listen to the last episode, I just interrupted you there, Dave, just to draw Cliff's attention to it.
I am probably now penniless and living on the streets because Cliff Richard has sued me for insinuating that he did things that he completely didn't do.
I said very nice things about Cliff.
But anyway, subscribe, like, retweet, share. Not retweet, this isn't a tweet yet.
You could
share.
retweet it. Why not?
You can. Anyway, let's start this episode.
Yeah, I mean, the professionalism goes out the window. We've had a few drinks, and I've had a few drinks. But yeah, you said some bad things about Cliff. I said nice things about Cliff. See, I love you, Cliff.
Yeah.
Invite me to come and play tennis with you, and I'll hang out with you and Sue Barker, and we'll have a great time, you know? But, you know, the thing is with Cliff, he likes tall speakers, but he also likes small speakers, and he is wired for sound. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
You know? But anyway, introducing episode 15. Only like 11 more or 10 more of these to go after this. You know, we're flying through them. You know, if you've stuck with us this long, well done. I think my mum's still listening. I haven't given a shout out to my mum. She listens to these the day they come out. She's like probably our most consistent and like enthusiastic listener. So hello, Paula. Hello, Mum.
Thank you, Paula.
Yeah, there we go. A little nice thing for my mum. I think this one will come out around her birthday as well. So
happy birthday.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure on the exact date, but this will definitely be a February episode. And my mum and dad have the same, like not the same birthday, but their birthdays are pretty much within a couple of days of each other. So happy birthday, Mum. Happy birthday, Dad.
Isn't your mum born on a leap year?
Almost born on a leap year by like 15 minutes. But yeah, so that's my mum. Anyway, that nobody cares about that but us. So let's talk about this podcast where the majority, over 50% of the viewers are from the USA, and have probably never even been to the UK, let alone heard of my mum. So
that's if America still has like internet communications and the impending civil war hasn't like claimed too many lives,
or Trump didn't press the button before January the 20th, which is before we're recording. I'm gonna nuke everywhere apart from Florida. Mar-a-Lago's the only place that supports me now, dude. I don't care about New York. I never liked it anyway. I've just sent a nuke to Queens. Shit place. Never liked it. But anyway, our intros have become a lot more rambling and nonsense talking.
It's because we have drunk a considerable amount of rum. I've gone past the point in which I can figure out percentages or fractions, so I'm not going to attempt to describe how much rum I've drunk.
Nah, I've had a fair amount. Let's actually get onto this episode, because like I said, our intros are getting long and rambling and nonsense. This is episode 15. This is the second worst song, in my opinion, of the top 25. We've agreed that we're going to do a episode 26 of this podcast is going to be an autopsy of what our best and worst of the 25 is. So I'm going to kind of move away from talking about what we think about the song in the intro, because I think we'll save those for that episode. We'll have an entire episode kind of dedicated if you want to know what we think. But without having to justify it, because I'm going to talk shit about it the whole episode anyway, this to me is the second worst song in the top 25. Stevie is my most disappointing because it came from Stevie, but this song, I had to listen to it about 10 times for the recording of this, because I kept getting about a minute in and going, oh, I don't feel like listening to this today. And then I'd have to rewind it, and I'd go, no, Dan, because you're going to do a whole fucking podcast on it, and people are going to listen. And now you have literally hundreds, almost thousands of listeners listening to you talk shit about these songs, Dan. So the least you can do is actually listen to the song you're slagging off. So I had to force myself to listen to it a couple times. I had it on repeat, and I hate this song. I just fucking hate it. I absolutely
despise it. They are, to say that it subtly, they are definitely not my kind of thing.
No.
Soft rock. What is the point in soft rock?
Well, this is the first thing.
That's such an oxymoron.
We'll talk about the artist first of all, as we normally do. Wet, 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 who, just their band name, I don't know if people know of the film The Commitments. It's one of my favourite films.
Yeah.
I love that. There's a joke in there that there's a band called And, and they all
Yeah.
go, and fucking and that's all I think of with Wet, Wet, Wet. I imagine somebody going in a Scottish accent instead of an Irish one, and I'm not going to do a Scottish accent because I can't do it.
Yeah.
But wet, wet, fucking wet. And that's what makes me think of, is
Yeah.
I found a great review that NME did where the title of it was just wank, wank, wank. And I wish I came up with that joke, but I knew if I claimed that joke, somebody would link in the comments that I'd stolen it from an NME article. But they're a Scottish soft rock band, and anybody that refers to themselves with soft rock, if you don't know what that means, it means shit. It means shit rock.
It means you have no balls. You've
Yeah.
taken everything that rock should be and you've removed it. You've castrated yourself.
You've castrated rock and roll. That's what you've done.
You have.
And Scottish rock is actually really good. Like, not some of my favourite bands, but some of the bands that I think have kind of shaped my opinion of music have been Scottish bands. So I don't want to slag off Scottish music. Scottish music generally is quite dour and depressing because, let's be honest, Scottish people generally are. And that's not a slag. I hope Ross is listening. My mum's friend Ross is a Facebook friend of mine, and he's Scottish, so I'm imagining he loves Wet, 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 because Scottish people like to pretend that everything Scottish is amazing, even if it's shite. I hope he's listening. I've only been to Scotland once. I liked Scotland. I like Scottish people. I like their attitude. And some of your music is really, really good. But if you're going to take the piss out of the English for having shit music, like Robson and Jerome, then we can take the piss out of you for having shit like this. They're a bad band. I'll give you a little bit of background history about them. So Marty Pellow, from what I can tell, their career seems to hinge on whether he's a member. So he's the lead singer. They have a new lead singer now, but we'll talk about that later on. But their lead singer during their sort of peak, quote unquote, or their successful time was a guy called Marty Pellow. And from what I can tell, he is Wet, Wet, Wet. Like, if he's in Wet, 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 can we just call them WWW? Because I can't bother to say that all the time. If he's
That's more syllables, though, Dan.
But I just fucking hate saying their name. It's like saying the word moist. Just
say wet once. Just call them wet.
They're wet. They are wet. That's a great way of describing them. But their career seems to hinge on whether he's a member. So he's currently not a member, so they're not really currently a band. Yeah. They broke up about 3 years after this song. They stopped being a band because he left. Anyway, before this song, they did have success. I don't know if they're remembered fondly, because apart from this song, this is the only one I knew by them. I'll get on to the rest of their back catalogue, because I have given it a listen. To the Scottish listeners, I don't know if we have Scottish listeners, but we probably do, because people like listening to us talk shite, so I'm imagining the Scottish are listening to us.
We don't know because we don't get demographic data.
We don't
You need to get independence for Scotland, and then we might get separate data.
Yeah, go independent. Go on, see how that works out for you.
Get on to Little Nicky about that.
Yeah, go on, see how that works out. After we're making such a success of Brexit, go on, be even more dependent, see how that goes. But, being on your own always works out. But anyway, so they did, from what I can tell, before this song, they did have success, and they'd had more success than I thought they had. I thought they were a one-hit wonder, because, I mean, again, this song is slightly before my time. I was 2 when this came out. I don't remember it being a hit, because I was very small. But they had success prior to this. They'd had a lot more success than I ever had imagined. They'd had a lot of top 20 hits. I think the thing that really stood out to me is their debut album went 5 times platinum. It almost went straight to number 1. It did go to number 1, but it was kept off number 1 in its debut couple of weeks because of Michael Jackson's Bad, which, if you're going to be second to anything in 1991, Michael Jackson's Bad is pretty... I think it was 91. I'm pretty sure this was another one of those artists that was on my list when I was doing the Brian Adams episode, but I didn't talk about them because I knew I'd be talking about them in the future. But it's still, according to chart success, one of the most successful debut albums of all time. This song isn't from
That's shocking, isn't it?
But I'm very impressed by that I sort of look and go, oh, okay, I give them credit. I didn't realise that they were that successful.
Yeah, well, they had, big hits. They did a cover of With a Little Help from My Friends.
Yeah, it was a charity single. Yeah, Childline, something like that.
Yeah, with Billy Bragg did the B-side.
I love Billy Bragg. We've met him.
Yeah, we've met him. We've met him.
I've met him 3 times.
And he shook my hand.
I've met him 3 times. Once with you. Once I met him in a pub. and he bought me a pint. And the time before that, I'd met him with my parents, and I said to him, like, he said, "Oh, I bet you're not a fan, but I bet your mum and dad are." And I said, "No, I'm a fan as well." And I started listing off songs of his that I liked, and he was like, "Well, in that case, we should all get a photo together." So I have a photo of him with my mum and dad. A very nice man, Billy Bragg. It's always nice.
He seems to be really nice
when you meet people that you like. You really like their music. I don't necessarily agree with him politically. He's a bit of a lefty loon, but I do like his music a lot, and I've met him, and he's a very nice man. And I don't have anything bad to say about Billy Bragg. And if Billy Bragg wanted to be in cahoots with them on a charity single, fair play, because he's a good man who has done good things. So thumbs up to Billy Bragg. There's our little shout out, because he's definitely not in this top 25. Never had a top 10 single as far as I know. I think his highest charting was Sexuality, and that got to like 22. This is off the top of my head. I'm probably wrong. Billy Bragg fans, feel free to comment about how wrong I am.
Yeah.
It's good for the algorithm. I was wrong about the Beatles, so I'm definitely wrong about Billy Bragg. I have a great quote, Tommy Cunningham, who's their drummer, because they're from sort of Clydebank, which is not Glasgow, but it's kind of Glasgow. I'm not very good on Scottish geography, but it's kind of Glasgow / not Glasgow. It's probably like saying Bristol is Taunton. It's something that people are going to, in the comments, go, it's not. But he has a great quote, which I think really sums up the band, and I wish I could do a Scottish accent. I can kind of do a Welsh accent, but I'm not going to. He says, "It was either crime, the doll, football, or music, and we chose music." And I like that. Like that, those were the 4 options in life. And that's how Wet, Wet, Wet ended up forming and having incredible success before this song. I actually think we'll get to the legacy of this song, but I think this song does them disservice. It is the best they've ever sounded, because they're not a very good band, but it's a shame that it overshadows, because they might have had potential to be better. Shall we move on to talking about the song itself? Because I think we've talked about WWW as much as is humanly possible. So it's a cover. Have we done many covers in this top 25?
There's quite a few.
Have we done many?
Like the last one, the Boney M one that we've done so far was cover.
I don't know if we've done that many. Whatever it was. Evergreen?
Evergreen, yeah, that was a cover, wasn't it?
That was a cover.
There's a couple, isn't there? Robson and Jerome, Unchained Melody.
Yeah, so we've done a couple covers. I don't know.
There's a fair few covers in this, isn't there?
But it was originally hit for the band The Trogs,
who we've seen live.
I've met Reg Presley.
Yeah. I've got a signed poster. I
have a personal connection to Reg, because the Trogs, they're famous for Wild Thing / This. Those were kind of their 2 big hits. Unfortunately, Reg Presley, the lead singer, is now dead. But before he died, both Dave and I met him. He was very nice and very friendly to us. I have a memory of... It's one of the few times I've met somebody slightly famous where I've not been slightly quite drunk, so I remember it quite well. He was very nice to us, and he talked a lot about UFOs, because he was a big UFO enthusiast. And the royalties from this song paid for him to do UFO research in America. So he looked into UFOs, and he was very convinced that, UFOs do exist. Whether you think they're aliens, and that's a different... An unidentified flying object is an actual thing. And he did a lot of private research into them, and had antenna put up all over, I think it's Pembroke in Wales, to look for them. I think that's where it was. I think it was in Wales, to study meteorological movements.
He probably picked up on a lot of the locals, and confused them with extraterrestrial life, didn't he?
Yeah, I remember, like I said, this conversation is all based on my actual personal one-to-one interaction with him. So I remember him personally telling both me and you this story. I have a photo of myself with him. I don't have a photo of you with him. I'm guessing you took the photo. But I have a photo of me and the remaining members of the Trogs stood there in a corridor. I remember his wife being very friendly and very nice, because we weren't quite sure if we could meet him and get an autograph and things, but his wife was like, "Oh, young people that are fans. Yeah. And she was very nice. So if, for whatever reason, she hears this podcast, rest in peace, Reg. He was a very down-to-earth, decent bloke. He treated both Dave and I very well. And you were lovely. And this was over 10 years ago now. So, yeah, fair play to him. But it was a big hit for him. As in, it wasn't actually that big of a hit for him, but when this song came out, he did very well. He got the majority of the royalties. Didn't as much go to WWW, which is a little bit of an issue later on. It's part of the reason that Tommy Cunningham left the band, because he didn't feel he was getting his fair share of royalties. But
the Trogs version of this song is very good, by the way.
It's far superior to this. This is bad.
It is. It's kind of like garage, isn't it? Before the term garage, or proto-punk, before proto-punk was even a thing. Very influential band. You can see that a lot of people who would eventually lead like the punk explosion in Britain were listening to that kind of thing in the late 60s. Yeah, it's just superior in every single way. It's like they took the heart and soul out of that track and they replaced it with commercial bullshit.
I don't feel that Trogs get the due that they deserve, because there's a lot of bands from about that time that are very overrated. Like,
yeah.
For example, the Jimi Hendrix Experience. I don't hate Jimi Hendrix. I think he's very talented, but he is so overexposed and over,
Yeah.
Again, it's not bad, but it's so critically, maligned as being the greatest thing ever. And there were a lot of things going on at the same time that were just as good. And one of those bands, in my opinion, is the Trogs. Listen to the Trogs, and honestly, you probably get more than you will from Jimi Hendrix because it hasn't been analysed as much. So, a lot of love for the Trogs. I think this podcast, we talk a lot of shite, but I do like to shine a light on positive things, like how much I like P. Diddy or how much I like Cher. And again, the Trogs is one of those things that I really like the Trogs. I really like Reg Presley. He was a really decent bloke. So, it was a cover. So we talked not last week, I think the week before, I referred to Phil Collins as the Antichrist of music. That sounds like I'm making a joke. It's actually a Noel Gallagher quote. Noel Gallagher called him the Antichrist of music. If there was a movie equivalent, it would be Richard Curtis. I fucking hate Richard Curtis. Everything Richard Curtis has touched, apart the fact that he was also involved with the second Mamma Mia movie, which I adore.
Yeah.
Again, I repeat myself. I talked about that in the Cher episode. Apart from that, which he did some screenwriting on, I believe, everything Richard Curtis has done is fucking terrible. Like, terrible with a capital T. He did Yesterday, which we talked about in the I Want to Hold Your Hand, I Want to Hold Your Hand episode. But he also did his big breakthrough hit was the movie that this song comes from, Four Weddings and a Funeral, which I fucking hate. I really hate Four Weddings and a Funeral. It represents everything to me about yuppie 90s people that have too much money and too much fucking time on their hands to sit around moaning about the fact that your girlfriend doesn't have as pretty a face as your friend's girlfriend, whilst you're getting married in a fucking tuxedo in a fucking castle, moaning about the fact that you're only on $500,000 a year while your friend is on $1 million a year. It's fucking poshies complaining about how difficult it is being a fucking poshie. It's a terrible movie.
He writes movies for middle-aged women who don't know better. Rich middle-aged women who don't know better. I had this discussion with my sister a couple of weeks ago because we watched The Boat That Rocked, and the concept behind that is really interesting. Like pirate radio back in was it 60s, 70s? Radio Caroline. Really interesting thing, and they could have made a really good film about that. It's a terrible film. And we looked at the Wikipedia page and we noticed that the more involved with a film that Richard Curtis is, the worse it is. So he did everything. He directed, wrote, and produced The Boat That Rocked. That's easily one of the worst films that I've seen recently. Love Actually.
Well, I was going to talk about that because this song was a huge hit for Wet WWW. It was Richard Curtis was the one that said to Wet Wet Wet, you should cover whatever this song is, Love Is All Around. This wasn't the only song he asked them to cover.
No,
there was something else which I can't remember, but the one that stood out was Gloria Gaynor's I Will Survive, which I would love to hear. I will survive. Like, what the fuck did their version of... in an alternate universe, we're talking about Wet Wet Wet's cover of I Will Survive, and that would be fucking hilarious.
Wow.
I wish they'd covered that. But Richard Curtis does kind of tip his hat to this song. and its
Yeah.
overwhelming success in Love Actually. Is it
Yeah,
Bill?
with,
Is it Bill Nighy?
Yeah, Bill Nighy.
Does a Christmas version of Love Is All Around, you know, and
Christmas is all around me.
yeah, and the joke is like, ha ha ha, isn't this a tacky over the played song?
Yeah. The joke's not funny because he did that. He turned that song and he made it tacky and overproduced and awful.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. We talked about what episode did we talk about the KLF? Was that Brian Adams? I think it's Brian. It's all merging into one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's just say it was Brian Adams.
I think it's Brian Adams. We talked about the KLF. I love the KLF, by the way. Shout out to Bill Drummond. But we talked about in that episode how this is one of those songs that got deleted. Marty Pello insisted it was like deleted from sale. They got to 15 weeks, which is 1 week off Brian Adams' record of 16 weeks at number one. And so they almost took the record, but they deleted it from sale before it could get a chance. However, because there were so many copies out there in distribution at the record stores, back when there were record stores, it still got to number 2 in its 16th week.
Yeah.
Do you know what kept it off number 1?
No, I don't. What was it?
That 1994 staple, Wigfield's debut single, Saturday Night. Didi-da-da-da! I think we talked about...
Amazing song. I love that so much more than this.
Did we talk about that in Barbie Girl? I think we did. But, Didi-da-da-da? I have no idea what she says at the beginning. But,
Saturday night.
So he insisted that the reason for its deletion was that the band wanted to focus on their next album, which was called Picture This, which this song does feature on.
Yeah.
But I have heard before that it's because they just didn't want to play it on Top of the Pops anymore. Hello, and welcome back. I don't think we left, but, you know, it's always nice to say welcome back, just in case in, 10 years' time when we're super YouTube famous and they add all the 1,000,001 adverts in the middle of our episodes, we've at least acknowledged it.
Yeah. If we get to that point, we're definitely going to have an ad every 30 seconons.
Oh, God, I don't even know what YouTube will look like in, 5 years' time. I think it will just be adverts.
You'll have to pay to use it.
You will, and it'll be shit. It's pretty shit already, because... I try watching some of my favourite YouTube videos and I have, adverts every, 3 minutes. The worst one, have you ever tried watching, a manual, how to do something video? And they add adverts. I tried changing the bulb on the car because I'm not a man. I don't know how to do that sort of thing. Like a proper man. I have to watch a YouTube video telling you how to change a light bulb on the car. And literally, it was like a 4-minute video and it had, 2 adverts. And when you're there in the dark trying to figure out how to change a fucking bulb, because you don't change the bulb during the day, because you don't notice that it needs changing during the day, you change it at night. And you're sat there on your phone watching this YouTube video with, usually, there always seem to be northern blokes, I don't know why, hey up, welcome to...
Real men.
Yeah, welcome to a how-to change for a Mini Cooper 2006 plate. Now, the interesting thing about this is it uses... And you're thinking, I just need to change my fucking bulb. I got to go to work. How do I do it?
I once got chased by someone, and this was one of the terrifying moments, and I was literally on the edge of jumping out of the car and having to fight for my life. So I was turning right on an intersection, and a car literally pulled out in front of me, and I was completely... it was my right of way. So I obviously was shouting through the window. They obviously couldn't hear at them. You fucking asshole! You could have crashed. And anyway, the car turned. It did a U-turn and followed me. And I was like, "Holy shit! What is happening now?" Didn't realize at the time I turned into a cul-de-sac, so there was literally no escape. So I eventually thought, well, hang on a second. Well, let's just see where this goes. I'm angry. He's angry. Let's just have a bit of a shout. Got out of the car, and it was just this lovely guy. He was saying, "Oh, sorry, mate. Sorry, we nearly crashed. Your indicator's not working." And I was like, "Oh, thanks for letting me know. Thank you so much."
I thought you were going to murder me.
Yeah. So that's my car light story, and I don't know how to check. I don't even know if my car has lights.
Who knows?
I think it's all LEDs.
I think these episodes become a lot more us just talking about shit that we'd normally talk about when we've had a few drinks. So
we need more focus, Dan. Do you know what we should have for focus? Let's have a Brian Eno oblique strategy card.
Okay, give me some tips, and I will talk about the next part, which is the historical context behind the song. Do you want to explain what those are?
Yeah, Brian Eno's oblique strategies are kind of like inspiration cards that he put together when he was sitting in a studio thinking, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do now. Now I've pressed all the buttons on the synthesizer. Where can I take this piece of music? So he basically sat down and wrote some really weird, wanky, pretentious things on about maybe 100 cards. So essentially, if you're stuck in the creative process and you need a bit of inspiration, you're meant to reach for one of these cards, and they're going to direct you towards the future of your video, your piece of music, your piece of art, whatever. So I've picked a card randomly from the deck, and I have received this card. Be Extravagant.
Okay, well that works well for you. What one should I be? Pick one for me.
I'll pick one for you.
Well, should I pick a number between 1 and 5? Count
Okay.
5 random ones out, and then I will pick a random one of those 5. So count 5. Have you got 5?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I would like number 4, and I will ask you some questions about the next part, the historical context, based on number 4.
Give the game away.
In this part, I'm going to talk about the historical context, which is all about the song in the context in which it was written / recorded. I think I'm going to give the game away because I was going to ask you questions about what you think music in the 1994 when this came out was actually like. I was going to relate it back to the previous episode we did based on Unchained Melody, about how there were a lot of Britpop artists such as Blur, Oasis, Pulp, that were hugely successful, but weren't actually having consistent chart success in the same way that bands like Wet 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 or artists such as Robson and Jerome were. However, I was going to talk about how middle-of-the-road music once again strikes its evil hand down, cutting through those big successful artists and showing you how middle-of-the-road, boring, shitty music will always win out over entertaining, exciting music that pushes boundaries. So bearing all of that in mind, Dave, what do you think the historical context of Wet Wet Wet's Love Is All Around, coming out in 1994, based on the heels of the success of the film 4 Weddings and a Funeral, as we previously discussed, would be? Does that give the game away?
That gave every single bit of the game away. You
Well,
took
there
away
you go.
all the talking points. You
There is
gave
nothing
the
to
game away.
I gave the game away. Basically, ruin the podcast.
Yeah, essentially what's happened with Wet 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 is the people who buy records are different to the people who consume proper music. You have all the old people who went out and watched the film and loved it, going out and buying the single, whereas everyone else, all the cool people, are listening to bands that are just emerging at the time.
I have a feeling, I'm not exactly sure if I'm bang on this, but I think this is off the top of my head because I was feeling that I didn't write this down, so I might be very wrong, and people like pointing out how very wrong I am about things off the top of my head. But one of my favourite albums of the 90s was Everything Must Go by the Manic Street Preachers. Absolutely brilliant album. And I have a feeling it came out the same time as Picture This by Wet Wet Wet. And Wet 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 did more commercially than one of my favourite Manic Street Preachers albums. So I have hiccups because I've drank too much rum. But yeah, and that depresses me because there was so much good music coming out of 1994. We talked in the Brian Adams episode about how the reason he was so successful was because he was not the best, but he was one of the better artists of a very shit bunch. 1994 produced some incredible music. Like, music was very, very good, particularly in Britain in 1994. To me, it's the peak of Britpop, because after 1994 it gets a little bit wanky and a little bit shit. Still good, but it's the difference between, like, you or I both prefer Definitely Maybe to What's the Story, the Oasis album. What's the Story did a lot better commercially than Definitely Maybe, but Definitely Maybe is the better album. And that's not us being pretentious hipsters, the songs are better. That came out in 94. I believe Blur, it might have come out in 93, but I have a feeling it came out in 94. Park Life, which is a better album than Great Escape, which came out in 95. Like, I think all the peak Britpop albums came out in 94, but they weren't getting the huge success that fucking WWW were having with shitty covers of Love Is All Around.
Yeah.
And that's the historical context. I mean, again, we keep banging on about it every week, and I feel like a broken record, but which I guess is appropriate for a music podcast. But I feel like a broken record that the British buying public like middle of the road shit. And
Yeah.
at least with Brian Adams, there wasn't much else to choose from, so fair enough. Like, what the fuck are the radio going to play in between Michael Bolton songs, other than songs that sound like Michael Bolton? I get that. But in 1994, you have so much great indie pop that you could play that is really, like, pushing the boundaries and really impressive. I mean, fucking Oasis did like 10 B-sides this year that sound better than anything Wet 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 ever touched. And they're the fucking B-sides. I'm swearing a lot more because my gran doesn't listen to this anymore. So, like, you're choosing to listen to Wet 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 over that. I mean, this is almost, again, 4 months of straight Wet Wet Wet. Like, fuck you, 1994, and fuck you, Richard Curtis. It's your fault. You know, everything bad in the 90s is your fault. I blame it all on you.
At least if they'd have picked I Will Survive, it would have been funny.
Yeah, I would love to hear that. There's an alternate reality where we're... what's the theory if there's an alternate amount of universes with an alternate amount of, like...
The multiverse theory.
The multiverse theory, yeah. There's one of those where we're talking about Wet Wet Wet's cover of I Will Survive, and we're like... I can't imagine how a Scottish soft rock band would do a version of Gloria Gaynor's I Will Survive. But instead we get Love Is All Around. But at least Reg got to see some UFOs. So fair play to him. You know, again, butterfly effect.
That's the one saving grace of this, isn't it? That Reg got some money.
Yeah. I mean, again, the butterfly effect. You and I were we got to meet Reg and talk to him about UFOs. Because of the fact he made a lot of money off this song. So, in a weird way, thank God it happened because we have that experience. I don't really have much else to talk about the historical context. Other than, like, fuck you, British public. I blame the Daily Mail. I imagine Daily Mail readers bought this. You know, they didn't want those Oasis boys talking about their drugs and their cigarettes and their alcohols. They wanted those nice Wet 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 boys talking about the love being all around them. That's what they wanted. You know?
Yeah.
As long as the love is towards those immigrants, you know?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I just have to go to a racist, angry Daily Mail listener, that's all they are.
But you're making fun of racists.
I am, yeah, I'm
racist.
not. I'm fully can I just put that out there before I get flagged for racism?
Yeah.
1994 was a great year for music, and this song does not represent. This is the biggest song from 1994, and that makes me sad.
Like we were saying in an earlier episode, this period of the 90s, there was so much exciting stuff. Like Nirvana was happening. And
Nirvana was still going on 94.
Yeah, and yet you still had people buying Wet, 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 and you still had people buying Robson and Jerome. You kind of despair, don't you? It's like being stuck in hell. I imagine these are the records that people play in hell endlessly, just to drive people to insanity.
It sows the seed that both you and I were very disappointed in the British public when they voted for Brexit. But we weren't surprised. And the reason we weren't surprised was because it's the same British public that voted for Brexit that bought Wet Wet Wet's Love Is All Around. It's those people. Nobody wants to admit that they voted Brexit, but 17.5 million of you did. Nobody wants to admit that they bought Wet Wet Wet's Love Is All Around, but 1.8 million of you did. I mean, a lot of those people are probably dead now because they're probably over 80. But still, you bought it. So, you know, you can be a Wet 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 denier, but somebody went out and bought it.
You sound like a Remainer, Dan. You sound like you want to reverse the democratic decision of 1.6 million people.
It's done now.
Wet 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 at 16 weeks at number 1.
15 weeks, Dave. Don't give them too much credit.
Nearly 16.
Nearly 16. Anyway, before we get to our final recurring segment of this episode, because I don't know how long this episode is, but I think it's gone on a fair amount. I just want to talk about the lasting influence. I listened to... So as I've said multiple times, I do listen to the artist within the context of their career. So I listened to a few of their earlier albums. I listened to a few of their later albums. I have said very bad things about this song. I don't enjoy this song. This is the best Wet 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 ever sounded. So if you hate this song like I do, there is no need to go any deeper into Wet Wet Wet's career. Their most recent release came out in 2007. it doesn't sound... There's not much to report other than, I have in quotes here, it sounds like a boring Take That album from 2007. That's my, 10-word review. If you liked Take That in 2007, and I don't hate Take That, but if you liked Take That in 2007, but you thought they were a bit too edgy, try listening to Wet, Wet, Wet in 2007. That'll tick your boxes. They've got a new album supposedly coming out this year, but who knows? Their album in 2000... Who knows? Who cares?
They've done enough damage. They've done enough damage to give them any more streams or credit.
Yeah. Their album in 2007 was called Timeless as well, which is just fucking hilarious. Wet, Wet, Wet in 2007 is fucking timeless. No, it's not. But the other weird thing is, so Marty Pello, who I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, as far as I can tell, he's the only consistent main member of Wet, Wet, Wet. Apart from the drummer, who's the only one that's left, the rest are all pretty much a stable sort of band of people. I don't know, don't care. But he's now left. He left in 2017. He left the sinking ship that is Wet, Wet, Wet. But I don't know if anybody watched The Voice. I occasionally watch it. It's like the X Factor, but a little bit less cynical, maybe. It's a bit more enjoyable than the X Factor. I don't like it, but it's on sometimes. Yeah. But they had Kevin Sim, he was in Liberty X, and not a few people might remember them. They were the losing people in Pop Stars. So if you refer back to our Will Young episode, we talked about how before the series Pop Idol, there was a show called Pop Stars, and the first series that produced the band Hearsay, but Hearsay were the winning band, and then the 5 leftover members formed a band called Liberty X. Richard Branson signed them. They had minor success. I think their big hit was Just a Little Bit... I don't remember the rest of it. Just a Little Bit More. That was their...
Yeah.
I can't... Anyway, he was one of the singers in that band. After they broke up, they've reformed a couple of times, but he won The Voice. Got a record contract. Nobody gave a shit about the album. A couple of years ago, he has joined Wet, 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 and he is now the lead singer of Wet, Wet, Wet.
Wow.
So if you want to watch Wet, 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 you can go and see them. They're meant to be touring this year if COVID allows them to. And Kevin Sim will be their lead singer. So you can watch a singer from Liberty X sing Wet, Wet, Wet songs with the remaining members of Wet, Wet, Wet. Won't that be a treat? You know? As if COVID wasn't bad enough.
Can we go? Shall we go?
If they play Bristol, let's fucking go.
Let's go, and let's hope that we catch coronavirus and fucking die.
Yeah, let's try and at least go backstage and tell and say, hey, we did a podcast about you. And then if you're fucking listening to this right now, Wet, 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 we pretended to be nice to your face, but we thought you were shite back then. We sat through a whole of your concert with Kevin Sim, who is a good singer. No slagging him off. And you were absolute wank. It was a waste of money. And now you're listening to our podcast where we talk about how shit you are, because that's how two-faced we are.
Do you know what they'll do? They'll look at their massive, massive piles of money and think, you fucking cunts, aren't you?
I've got 2 Ferraris and a house in Edinburgh.
Yeah.
But anyway...
Let's before we get on to the last section, let's end it on a positive and say, what's your favourite Scottish band?
Probably Primal Scream. I love Primal Scream.
It's an interesting one.
What would be yours?
You know, I've been listening to the Cocteau Twins. Is that how you pronounce the name? Quite recently?
I think so, yeah. That's how I've always heard it.
Yeah. Paolo Nutini. Does he count as Scottish? He's quite fun,
he's Scottish. Yeah, I think
he's
like
half
Glasgow,
Italian, half Scottish. He's quite pleasant.
Oh, Jenny, don't be hasty.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
nice,
I like
throwback stuff. Scotland, country full of talents. We love Scotland.
lots of good music you can from Scotland. Wet, Wet, Wet isn't one of those bands, but
No.
there are lots of good bands from Scotland. So should we get to our final part to see us out this episode?
Yeah, so the final part is the bit you've all been waiting for.
Tenuous Kanye.
Tenuous Kanye.
Tenuous Kanye. So, quite tenuous this week. Unsurprisingly, the band Wet, Wet, Wet have never come into the sphere of pop culture that is Kanye West. But, I mean, this is very tenuous Kanye. So I looked up, one of the things I found was a top 10 Jay Leno moments. So the Jay Leno show, for those that don't know, it's like the Jonathan Ross show, as in it's a shit version of a, chat show in America. It's not the number one. It's like always the number 2 biggest show in America. But the Jay Leno show in America had I found a list on I don't know, BuzzFeed or something like that. The top 10 Jay Leno moments of shocking moments on Jay Leno. Number 2 was Kanye West being called out for his Taylor Swift. Yo, Taylor, I'm happy for you. I'm gonna let you finish. That was number 2. Number 1 was when Hugh Grant went on about 3 days after he'd been caught having sex with a prostitute.
Wow.
Hugh Grant famously starred in the movie 4 Weddings and a Funeral. So that's my tenuous Kanye. If it wasn't
That
for
is
Wet Wet
very, very, very tenuous.
I don't know if it's as tenuous as my Brian Adams episode, but it's reasonably tenuous. But yeah, so that's my tenuous Kanye. Hugh Grant, you can go Wet Wet Wet, Richard Curtis, Hugh Grant, Jay Leno, Kanye West. There you go. I mean, I got Kanye West into this episode. What more do you want? But yeah, I think that's where we'll end this week.
That's where we'll have to end.
Hello, Wet Wet Wet, if you're listening.
Yeah, thank you for listening, but fuck you.
Make better music.
Well, no, just stop. Just stop.
Just stop.
You're not
Yeah,
going to make better
you've done
music.
it now. You've been doing it for 20 years and it's still bad.
You've made your money. You don't have to keep subjecting people to this.
I listened to your album, I genuinely did, and it was really bad, and I tried to find a positive. I listened to fucking Aqua's most recent album, and at least I had a couple nice things to say.
Yeah, you did.
I did. I Will Young, and I got called out for that, and I tried to be nice to Will Young, and even this is too far. This is bad. They're a bad artist. This is bad music. Goodbye. Next episode. We've got good artists next. This is the end of it as well. End of the negativity, because next week is an artist and a song that I really like.
Yeah, we've got a couple in a row, haven't we, that are going to be good. We're going to be happy and positive. We're not going to say anything bad about these next 2 artists, at least. And maybe even the next 3, because we've got... Coming up, we've got Wham!, The Beatles, and Pharrell. So if you want to hear our opinions on those, subscribe.
Yeah, and like and leave reviews and do all the comments and all the things that we ask you to do, because we are overlords, your musical overlords for the podcast. But yeah, anyway, I think that's a good place to end. And
it is,
see you next week in the next batch we record. So who knows what state the world will be in when we next get recording. But goodbye.
Goodbye.